Hello, welcome back to another video on my thoughts on the current comic market. Recently, I did a video on a market report that included this Amazing Fantasy 15 4.5, and I discussed how the 26,000 is on a low end in price going back a few years, okay? And I have put some thoughts into it and look at the past data, past numbers, to try to make sense, put some logic behind the movement of this book, and let's talk about this. I also include right now GPA data for this book, and no doubt you can see for yourself that the value of this book at 26,000 is on the low end going back to 2017. Now, is this an anomaly, or this is just the way this book behave in a rational manner? Okay, that's the key word, rational. This hobby at times can behave very irrational. When a book is so hot, and if you look at the GPA data right now on the screen, you can see that for a long time this book was moving in rational manners. Okay, if you go back and look at 2009, 2010, 2012, the line is not crazy. It is slight movement, but it was an upward trend that act rational. It behaved rational. The return was not out of line. One of the things that you hear me talk occasionally on my channel is the phrase reversion to the mean. What does that mean? Reversion to the mean. Every investment, whether it's stocks, real estates, commodities, collectible, over a long period of time has an average return. Like the stock market, the average return, if you go back 30 years, is probably around 10%. Okay? Reversion to the mean is a term that investment professional, statistical folks like me will look at and say, well, if the average over the long run is 10%, then when you have an anomaly, a year where the investment jumped 30 or 40%, something is odd, something is out of line, and likely that investment will give back some until it get back to the mean. Okay, and I think this is exactly what is happening with many big books, whether it's Hulk 181 or Amazing Fantasy 15. Okay, you can't fight trend for too long. If the trend is up, that's fine. But if the stock move far ahead of the trend as far as the return, that's a problem. Okay, um, let me show you a quick trend line. Okay, so here is a chart that I superimpose a line. You can see the red line right here that run from 2012 upward. That's the trend line of where the stock was heading from 2012. Okay, that's a straight line where the return is basically the same. Okay, and as you can see, somewhere in 2016 and 2017, the price of this book went way ahead of the trend line. Okay, so now it over the past 6 months or a little bit longer, the book has flatlined and trend down. Okay, does it mean that it's gonna touch the red line eventually? No. If you extend that red line forward the next 2 or 3 years, it will keep going up. And if the book stay flatlined, if the Amazing Fantasy 15 4.5 stay at the 26,000 range for the next 2 years, that red line will catch up to it in 2021 or so. Okay, so there's very likely that this book will tread water for the next couple of years at this price range because it need to regress to the mean. It need to come back to the average because it was way ahead of its time as far as what this book has done. Okay, and if you look at other grade, you see the same thing. Let me show you what happened to the 4.0 range. The same kind of madness happened. Huge jump, way ahead of the trend line. Okay, and now it is giving back. It is returning to the red line, just as the other grade is. So, the way I look at the market right now, as far as Amazing Fantasy 15 or Hope 181, yes, both books as well as many other big books are correcting. Okay, that's the term. You want to use crashing, correcting. It is doing what I think rational market is behaving. It's not acting weird. It's not acting out of line. What was out of line was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, where this book went crazy, way ahead of trend, way ahead of the average. That's what happened. That is when it was weird, bizarre, and act kind of, way irrational. And many people talk about it. Many people talked about how the price for Amazing Fantasy 15 or Hawk 181 was going crazy last year or 2 years ago. Okay, so now it is behaving more rational than the past few years. So there's nothing to be alarmed if you're in this market for the long run. By that I mean 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Then take this as a lesson on how you should put money in the market in the future. If you see a book way hard ahead of its trend, hold back, avoid, wait, be patient. Yeah, all the words that a lot of people don't like to use, but that's the rational things to do because in time the book will return to its average. Okay, so if you want a Fantastic Four 1 and it's been so hot the last 3 or 4 years, at least the last 2 years for sure, perhaps it's not the right time to chase and buy a copy on the high end of the price range, right? The right thing to do is be patient. Yes, it's hard to say be patient of Fantastic Four #1 because a lot of things can happen in the next 6 months or a year. Because hey, if Disney announced a movie, that book can go higher. Absolutely. But if you're in this market, if you're in this hobby for the long run, by that I mean 20 years from now, is this smart to chase down a Fantastic Four 1 right now when it is way ahead of its trend? You could look at 5 years of dead money. Yeah, 5 years of dead money because the book can stay hot for another year or two and then it can behave just like the Amazing Fantasy 15 is doing right now. Okay, so be careful. Hopefully everything that I said makes sense. I hope.